Okay, we are live, we are recording. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about editing, an automated editing process that will give you a huge jump. I'm going to demonstrate for you exactly how lazy I can be, um, and some things that I've done to overcome that laziness. And along the way, I'm going to show you a little bit about Instaauthor and how the story was created that we're going to go through and do this editing experiment. Now, there are some things that are repetitious in action. So I have done all of them in advance, but I'm going to show you each one of them as we go along so that you'll have an idea. When we're done, please remind me there are two prompts that I'm going to give you. I'm also going to give you some VBA code and a copy of a Word document that's part of my laziness. Okay. Having said that, let me go ahead and share my screen. If you have questions at any time, please feel free to interrupt. Let's see. Welcome, Sherm. It's been a long time. Let's see here. Okay. Somebody verify for me that you can see my screen.
I can.
Yeah, see it.
Very good. Very good. All right. So let's start off with the instant author side of things. Uh, Scroll up here a bit. And I'm going to tell you what I did. I had this idea. Um, I'm kind of fascinated with the whole off grid, um, sustainable living, right? For some reason, I don't know why, I just don't trust the government to be able to provide electricity and food and all sorts of things. And that belief only became much stronger after what's the word for it? After our experience with COVID. And I have to keep flipping back and forth here to let people in. Um, and so I went ahead and I asked the AI to write a book about somebody who was stuck working in an office and decided to make the transition to working off grid. And when I did that, I went in and I created an outline, and I'm going to show you the outline that I created. Loading up my outlines here. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think that I ran this twice. The first time I let it come up with its own list of characters. And then I went back and I added those characters into the character set so that I can have them consistent throughout the book. Okay, here it is. Jack's Wild Call, A Journey to Live Off Grid. And when I did this, um, I turned around and I chose the characters. Here's a little button where you add characters. I'll show you where we define them. Anyway, and it shows here what chapters different people appear in. And then here's the individual uh, notes for each chapter. Now, here's what I found when I first did this. When I was using my own software, I found that in one chapter, it said that Jack worked in this office. And a few chapters later, it said Jack at his job at the hardware store, right? I said, well, this isn't consistent. And so we went back to the drawing board and we had the software go through and look at a whole bunch of different things. Look at timelines, look at repetition, look at the characteristics of people, how old are they, etc., and make sure that as it was writing forward, it was sticking with that. But you can imagine that there are literally an infinite number of combination of things that you could spend years programming into it. Just as an example, the wizard had a scepter in his hand in chapter 3, and in 7 it was a magic wand, right? Or the description of a particular dog's barking. Those things, infinite number of combinations. So you really have to have something that can go through and read it all. And one of the problems of playing your own editor is that we have a tendency to read what we were thinking when we wrote, not necessarily what we wrote, right? So that's one side of it. Another little thing that I want to point out is this system writes a book a chapter at a time. It does it all at once, but it takes each of these descriptions of the chapter and it generates chapter 8, chapter 9, then chapter 10. Okay. It doesn't take it all as one and then say, okay, let's write the 12 chapters all in a single go. And part of that has to do with the limitations of AI and how much uh, context, the size of your token window, etc. Right? So we go through and we do that. Now, the one other thing that I said I would show you. Let me show you a couple things here. If you have your book laid out and you say, wait a minute, it was in chapter 4 that I wanted to do such and such, you can come in here and edit this and you can rerun. All right. You could do that ad nauseum. I have never actually gone in and changed the outline content because I said, I want this to happen or I want that to happen, but you certainly could. Now, let's go back to profile. Here in characters, after I got the initial run, I went in and I added the characters in their description. So Jack is the protagonist, and if you look at how characters are created, and there's a whole video on this, you can see where all of this information is put in. All right, so that it has a solid foundation to work from. This is if you're writing fiction. If you're writing nonfiction, it's much easier. But fiction requires a little more work, right? Here's our create character deal. So basic information, physical information, personality, background, character arc, all of that kind of good stuff. All right. Last thing I want to show you is in the outline itself, and it's kind of important to this book. If I was creating an outline, I have this button here, generate new outline. One of my choices is, do I want to use a template, right? And these templates are, let's call them winning formulas for writing books. And so we have the hero's journey, which you may or may not have heard of, um, story mountain, 7-point story structure, etc. Right? We have these in here, and when I did this, I did the hero's journey. Okay, so let's go ahead and move this up and get on with the show. So after I've done all of this and I have my prompts and whatnot that I use to create the story, I generated the story, and it shows up here in books. And I come down here and I download it. Jack's Wild Call, blah, blah, blah. And this is the book as it initially comes out. And I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. I can download it from here, but this is what it looks like after generation. If I wanted to, I could edit it here in these different sections. I don't really want to do that. This reminds me what AI model I used. We've got a ton of them. All right, so let's go take a look. Let's see. So I had this, that's 12 chapter prompts, editor prompts. Okay, this was the original. This was the original. If I were to just download it right now, this is what it comes up as. And here's my 12 chapters. Now I could go through and I could read this and I could look for inconsistencies. I could look for little problems, but that would be very time consuming. And how many times are you really willing to do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to an AI and I'm going to use a prompt, and we'll take a look at the prompt. Let's go ahead and close this. Save your changes to this file. Well, what file is it? Oh, yes. Let's save that. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the prompt that I used to check this. And I'm going to come over into, I happen to like rock. I've got subscriptions for basically all of them. Uh, but let's have a look here. And when you go through and you read what it has to say about your manuscript, don't take it personally. It's going to give you all of the negatives. So let's see how far back we can go with this. Manuscript evaluation and edits. All right. So here we have this prompt where it tells them you're an expert book editor and publishing analyst. The entire manuscript is loaded into your workspace as plain text. Perform a rigorous chapter by chapter evaluation of the manuscript in a single run, then deliver a consolidated editorial report. High level workflow, parse the chapters. Identify chapter boundaries by locating headings that match any of these patterns. Chapter, blah, blah, blah. If no explicit headings exist, split by the largest logical sections you detect. Number two, iterate and evaluate. For each chapter in chapters, create a 2-sentence summary of its main events or arguments. Score consistency, accuracy, marketability. List strengths and weaknesses, bullet points for each category. Provide 1 to 3 recommendations that would yield the greatest improvement. Output a formatted block titled chapter whatever, using the template below. Storage chapters, evaluation internally. Do not print results yet. Overall synthesis after the final chapter is evaluated. Compute the average chapter scores for consistency, accuracy, marketability, the average total chapter score, overall manuscript score, overall manuscript summary, strengths, weaknesses, marketing position. provide final recommendations, editing paths, submission strategy, next steps, deliver the report, compile the introduction, every chapter evaluation, and the overall summary into one markdown formatted report. Release the entire report in a single response, no partial or streaming output. Chapter evaluation template. And then we have the report sections. Now, mind you, it does this for every single chapter. So here I uploaded what I just showed you. Jack's wild call, a journey to live off grid. And this is what it came back and told me, right? I'm not going to read all of this to you, but it gives you this idea up front, and then it goes into all of this detail with each chapter. So it scored this, and it said on consistency for chapter 1. It gave me 25 out of 30 possible points. Establishes Jack's internal conflict, clearly aligning with the middle grade theme of self-discovery, maintains a consistent narrative voice, and reflects Jack's relatable frustrations and aspirations. Weaknesses: some repetitive descriptions of Jack's dissatisfaction, dullness of the office life mentioned multiple times, slow the pacing. The transition from indecision to determination feels abrupt, lacking sufficient buildup of Jack's motivation. Accuracy score 28 out of 30, and it goes through. Marketability 32 out of 40. Okay, total chapter score, it gave it an 85 out of 100. Are there any questions so far? Okay,
Hey, I got a
I'm
quick
not going to
question.
go ahead.
Um, is there a limit to the size of text file you can upload to the AI, even with Grok or Super Grok? Because I've run into issues before of trying to upload like an entire book for it to review.
Uh, well, I haven't hit that limit. My advice would be, of course, break the book down into smaller sections that would contain multiple chapters. Now, this one right here, this is only a 12 chapter book with probably 12,000 words, right? But I've done others that are 30,000 and still pulled it off. So that would be my approach. By
Well,
the
one
way,
of the
go ahead.
challenges of uploading one chapter at a time is that the AI doesn't always seem to connect the dots between the chapters. Is there some way to do that within Instaauthor?
I'm not
I know.
suggesting, I'm not suggesting, there's two answers to that. I'm not suggesting one chapter at a time. Okay. I'm suggesting if you've got a really large manuscript that you're talking about, um, I'm suggesting that you do it in sections. So maybe 12 of your chapters or whatever 12,000 words or 20,000 words or 30,000 words comes to, right?
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that there can't be possible mistakes. Number two, you could always go and do this. I'm doing it in Grok right now, but you could go over to Gemini, which has a uh, larger context window. I think they can handle, what is it, 2.5 million words now. It's something crazy,
Okay.
right? Now, Instaauthor tries to eliminate some of the obvious things up front, right? But like I said, it's not going to be perfect. So let's go through and come down to where we get to the summary of what it gave us. And then I'll show you my next little trick in all of this. Okay, so let's look at the overall manuscript summary. Let's see. So it says some glowing things, and then it says, however, the manuscript has notable weaknesses. Repetitive chapter structures, particularly in early learning focused chapters 2 through 5, risk monotony and occasional inaccuracies in technical details, oversimplified foraging or construction, undermine realism, blah, 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 right? And then talks about the marketing positioning. Now, this is interesting because this changes after we go through and we make the corrections. The AI, if you tell this, and I tell it to write most things at a middle school level, right? There are multiple levels that you could write at. I write it at that level because, embarrassingly enough, in the U.S., 65% of the population reads at or below a sixth grade level. I was shocked to learn that, but you have to cater to your audience. Okay. Um, and then down here, it came up with an overall manuscript score after your ego's been bruised, after what you just read, of 89.2 out of 100. Okay. And I say, well, that's not bad. All right. So then it makes some final recommendations. And within that same window, what I do now is I run a second prompt against each chapter individually. And we're going to go through and we're going to read this for a single chapter. You're an experienced book editor. The full manuscript and a detailed editorial evaluation for chapter 1 are available to you. This evaluation provides recommendations to improve the chapter's consistency, accuracy, and marketability. Task: revise only chapter 1 of the manuscript, implementing all of the editorial recommendations for that chapter. Guidelines: retrieve and review the original text of chapter 1. Apply every recommendation from the chapter's editorial evaluation to the text. Make revisions to wording, sentences, or structure as needed to improve the chapter's flow and clarity, fix any inconsistencies or inaccuracies, and enhance reader engagement and marketability. Preserve the author's original voice, style, and tone throughout the edits. Return the revised chapter 1 as a polished final draft with no inline comments, notes, or editing marks, just the revised narrative. Optional. And if you don't want to use this, take it out. If any recommendation suggests adding or clarifying content that isn't originally in chapter 1, make a reasonable addition aligned with that feedback, staying true to the author's intent and style. Now output the fully revised text of chapter 1 as instructed, with all edits applied and no extra commentary. Okay? This is an incredibly powerful prompt. These were all developed under O3 of OpenAI, and we went back and forth quite a bit. And if you do a lot of prompting, what you found is that being iterative with it is how you get what you want, right? There's a saying, don't use AI, work with AI. Well, that's what we're doing here. So it came up with a revised chapter 1, and then I gave it the same exact prompt for chapter 2 through 12. Now, if I had to go through and fill this out for each one, it would drive me crazy. So what I have done somewhere up here, let me go ahead and grab it in Word. I have already written this for each of the 12 chapters. It knows nothing about the book, right? But I've written this for each of the 12 chapters. So all I have to do is page down and copy one in at a time, because otherwise there would be about 4 different places that I would have to tell this is for chapter 4. Everybody get that? And if you need to do more than 12 chapters, you can just copy it on down. You only have to do this one time. All right. This is one of my things for being lazy. Even when I did this, I did it with AI writing code for Microsoft Word to generate this. So we're AI all the way around. Okay. Let's go back to this and let's do a demonstration of what this looks like. So we're going to grab, I'm going to do it like I hadn't already done it. We're going to go ahead and grab this first piece up here. This first prompt. And you could use any AI to do this. I just really like Grok myself. All right, so I've done a copy. Let's open a new Grok window. Here's my prompt. Let me bring in the manuscript. And here it is. And this is exactly how I got all of the data that I just showed you. So this will work its way through see, it's working now. This will work its way through the 12 chapters, and then I'll show you the next steps.
While you're going,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, while you're going down through this, I just, on a higher level, is your intent to self-publish this on Amazon? Is that kind of the model that you go through? Or do you use publishers?
I'm not a fiction writer per se. Until I fix this, and saw how easy this was to do. I do a lot more how-to stuff. Like one of them I put out recently. For those of you who don't know, I'm in Pattaya, Thailand, and Thailand not too long ago legalized marijuana, and so I did a how-to book on growing marijuana. But I've done how-tos for lots of stuff. Now I have another genre that I'd like to take a look at and see how it goes. Years ago, I rewrote how flight instruction was done, and I'd like to see how well that transfers over into this system and showing flight instructors how to use what I came up with. Okay, so this has once again all of the recommendations for each chapter. So what I do now is just come over to my document that I showed you. I'm just going to do this once. I'm just going to do it for the first chapter. but I have to do it in the same window, because this way it has all of the information together. So we'll take that. We'll come back over to here. We'll plop it into this. And Y. There we go. Oh, is this not done? Oh, that wasn't finished. Okay. Plop this in here and tell it to run. And it's going out, it's doing chapter 1 for me. And I'll just keep pasting back and forth. I actually have, does anybody here use a software called ZeroWork? I'll take the silence as a no. It's an automation software. It's one of them we use. We're actually an agency that automates businesses. And ZeroWork, we have built an automation that automatically does all of the stuff that we're doing here in terms of the editing. So we can tell it to keep running through multiple times if we wanted to. Okay, so it's turned around and it's given us our chapter 1. And then once it's done this, what I do is I keep a document open. In this case, Notepad++, and I will do a copy and paste. Give myself a few blank lines, go back and do chapter 2, copy and paste all the way through. Any questions so far? Have I lost anybody?
We're still with you.
Okay.
Questions.
It's 1:36 in the morning here, so it's very possible I'm incoherent. All right. Okay, so after I get all of that, then what do you think I want to do? I want to see what kind of progress I've made. Now, you remember before we had an 89 showing up out of this, 89 point something. So after I ran all of this through, let me see. I have to close the format like this to get to where I need to go. Here we go. Make sure I'm in the right place. And if I look here at this, you see my 89 only came up to a 90.2. All right. If you're manually copying back and forth, that would be a lot of work to keep going back over this again and again. But because you have all of the recommendations and you see where it's telling you can make things better, it might be easier for you to go in and make some manual adjustments at this point. If you've got a really high score to begin with. Okay, so that is how we use AI to do our editing. That's our automated process, or as post-automated as we can. So you tell
Jeffrey,
me, what do you?
I
Yeah.
have a question about your scoring criteria or whatever. At what point do you just call the ball? Like 89% might be a blockbuster hit, or you might have to get to 95. I mean, you know what I mean? When is it good enough? Have you determined that yourself?
The AI actually came up with that,
Okay.
and there's another place where it defined it, and for some reason that definition I'm not seeing it here, but it was like 90 and above. It's ready to go with minor editing, and when you're down around 80, you've got a pretty good amount of work to still do. That gives you a good ballpark idea.
Okay. But I mean, the real question is you were at 89 and now you're at 90.2. When do you say
Yeah,
it's good enough?
big, give me a big
Right.
jump. Pardon me? Yeah. You really
I
at this point right here in our going through this, I'm going to tell you when I went through this the first time, at this juncture, I had not even read the output. Okay. Because, if you're doing something and you've got, let's say, for sake of discussion, 30,000 words, right? How long is it going to take you to read that 30,000 words? So what I want before I go and invest that reading of the 30,000 words, I want this to remove as much of the problems as possible before I get involved. That's why I said, we work, that's part of why I said we work with the AI, not necessarily just,
right.
using the AI. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let it go through and do as much cleaning as it can, right? And if you've got an automated system, perhaps one day I'll show that on a video. It's installed on another machine here. But I'll do a video where it shows that we can see. I could go back and I could do this multiple times. I could also say if I noticed, as an example, going through and reading this, that there was a particular type of problem that it just wasn't making good progress on, then I would go back and have a discussion with the uh, with the AI that created it, and said, "Well, here's the output that I'm getting, and here's what it's missing. What can we do to make this better?" And I'm quite sure that everybody on this call could probably do a better job than I already have, just by investing the time to pick out those key points. But one of the questions becomes is how many of those little things, right? Just keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it.
Well, I mean, you could keep correcting it ad infinitum, right? And in the
Yes.
meantime, you could write 5 more novels and they might be, no, seriously, like if you're writing a
Yes.
series and they're mediocre, but you can sell the crap out of them, well, get it to market because it ain't going to make you any money if it's sitting on your hard drive, right?
Are you familiar with Khalil Gibran?
I'm sorry, you cut out with who?
Are you familiar with Khalil Gibran?
No, I am not.
He wrote a famous book that's been translated into, I forget how many languages, called The Prophets.
Yep.
And in the cover of the book, on the inside cover, it says that he held on to that manuscript for 4 years until he made sure that every word was the absolute best that he had to offer. And I thought you would get awfully skinny doing that. So yes, and it is much more difficult to do fiction than it is how-to books,
Yep.
right? And then I like to take the how-to books, and you'll see it in our manual. I like to take the how-to books and put them into a flip book. It just makes for a more pleasant reading experience, right?
Yeah,
You ask
I
about
agree.
you ask about KDP. There's a reason that I personally don't sell on KDP. Um, everybody here knows what a low content book is.
Yep.
Okay, so I had an outsource worker who I had creating low content books and posting them. And one day she was doing a really great job for me, and in a single day she did 70 something low content books.
Oh my God.
And Amazon came back and they banned me. I
Oh,
don't know if they thought that we weren't using any kind of automation software to do that either. Uh, but I think that they assumed that we were,
yeah.
and so they banned me. It's if you're in the industry, if you're doing stuff on the internet long enough, uh, if I was going to give somebody some advice today, I would say don't use your primary company and real name for anything because when they step on your pecker, it really causes an inconvenience, right? So, yeah, I was doing sales on eBay, and yeah, I was actually in the eBay partner network, and I was making money as an affiliate, about, 3,500, 4,000 a month. It was going pretty good, and it wasn't requiring much work at all. And then all of a sudden, one day they send me this message, and they said, "We've linked your account to a previously banned account." I had never had an account before. Okay. So they stole my last month's commissions and threw me out of the eBay partner network.
Did you
And
appeal
so
it?
uh at that time there was no appeal. And I
Oh,
found a phone number that I was convinced was a phone that was sitting in a locked closet somewhere because it was never answered.
oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You can appeal to Amazon, and if it's been a while, you can explain the nature of the issue, or as you believe it to be. They may very well reinstate you.
Yeah, I can give that another shot. I tried to appeal it up front, and they didn't accept it. I've just with some of these things I've had terrible luck. I learned SEO early on, and what I should have done was learn AdWords early on. But anyway, so one day I had this. I was going through doing some keyword research, and I found something that on eBay it was listed as the number one and the number three out of the top 10. I think it was one and three was this particular product. I didn't know what the product was, but I went over and I said, let me go check the competition um, on AdWords, and what AdWords was telling me was that the clicks on this were 5 cents. Okay. Well, here's the thing with 5 cent clicks, if you were looking for hairspray, I could sell you dog. All right. There's just a whole lot of room there to play. So I said, let me go ahead and test whether this is real or not. And I was not an AdWords. I was not an AdWords guy. So this is the very first ad I'm putting up in AdWords. So I go and I look at who's in the number one position, and I knew the tactics, point to the guy who's in the number one position, and that helps your quality score. I wrote an ad that um, I didn't care if anybody did anything with. I just wanted to see the traffic. And Google came back and they banned my AdWords account. So I contacted Google on this, and I spoke to some woman, and she looked at the ad and she says, "Well, I don't see what's wrong. Let me go talk to the guys who really know upstairs." And so she puts me on hold for about 10 minutes, and she comes back and she says, "Yeah, you're in violation of our terms and conditions. I says, well, what did I do wrong? She said, I don't know, but the guys upstairs said you were, and they really know their stuff. I says, well, that was really helpful. I think what happened with them was I had put in, when I went to fund the ad, I was using an American Express Platinum card, and you don't always know what your limit is, but I knew what mine was. And my limit was like $66,000 a month. And when I went to put money on the account, it came back and said that it was rejected. So I contacted American Express and they said, Jeff, no one even tried. You know, nothing's been rejected on your account. No one even tried to put a charge against it. So I put a ticket into support with Google, and after a week, I sent them a how shall I say, a not overly nice email on the lack of response, and I think that's what actually made bans. Yes, so
That could be.
if you stick around long enough, you know, what could I get banned from next? I don't know how much is left. There are some networks. There's some Etsy stuff and whatnot that I haven't done. So you know, there's still hope out there that that there are other people I can get that banned notification. I had during the pandemic, we have two PayPal accounts. We have our it was effectively two corporate accounts, but one of the corporations we had shut down. And the only thing I used this account for, I used it for two things. One was I used it for moving money back and forth. You know, I would take money from our corporate account and move it over if I didn't want some charge to come in and take the cash, right? So I was using it for cash management, and then I would move it all back at once and go take the money. The other thing I was doing was during the pandemic, I was sending food money to people in the Philippines. Not a lot of money, but 1,000 pesos at a time, so like $22. They didn't have any kind of assistance like what they had in the States. So that was all I was doing. And one day I get a notification from PayPal that my account has been closed. And I contacted them and they said, well, we can't tell you why. It doesn't say here, but it could be who you were sending money to. As an example, if you were sending money to somebody who sells firearms, and that would be against our terms and conditions, then your account could get banned for that. I says, nobody was selling me a firearm for 1,000 pesos. And I was only sending 1,000 pesos out at a time. So, yes, you name it. One day we got a notification. We had a programmer who was over in Pakistan, and we only did business with Payoneer to pay this one guy because PayPal doesn't operate over there. One day Payoneer contacts us and says, can't tell you why, but we can't do business with you anymore. Well, when you're only sending money to one person and it's somebody in Pakistan, you got a pretty good idea, right? And he had a very common name. In fact, some of you may know him, so I don't want to embarrass him. But he had a very common name. It was equivalent of the name of their president. And so anyway, long story short, we don't do Payoneer either. Hello, Brad. Missed a hell of a demonstration. Okay. Now that we're beyond my war stories of how many different things can you get banned and kicked out of? It's silly, isn't it?
Well, the worst part is they won't tell you what rule you broke,
Yeah.
so you can fix it. I mean, that happened to me with Facebook ads probably 15 years ago. I worked with a Facebook rep to set up lead gen for a realtor client of mine, and we were generating like 3,000 leads a month, and it was great. It was very lucrative for me. And all of a sudden, my account was on hold. I had violated some terms, and I couldn't get him to tell me. And I tried to tell him, I worked with your rep. You know, he helped me set up the ad campaign because I'd never done Facebook ads before. They reinstated it, and then I learned about Business Manager, and I started running everything through Business Manager because they were gonna. I had a couple of other clients that I was running through this account, and they were gonna cancel everything. But that's the way to do it, is to be as anonymous as possible. The challenge is if you
Jeez.
use the same IP address, the same credit card, same email, that just, it looks like you're trying to bypass their editing process and, sneak back in another way. So I, for everything I do now, I create a new Gmail. I create a VPN, a different IP address, clean browser or whatever. And I've done, haven't had any problems probably for like 7 or 8 years. That's served me
I,
well.
I'll give you another one. You familiar with the Zoom cash transfer service?
No.
Okay, well they're a money transfer service, and I was living in the Philippines. Uh, I had an outsourcing company there, Philippine outsourcing, and anyway, over time, because I opened up a bar and a couple of internet cafes, I was using Zoom to send money to the Philippines, and I would have it hit my American Express card, $2,500 at a time, send it over. And when I first signed up with them, they asked me some questions, and I answered their questions, and it was no problem. And about 2 years later, they called up and they says, "Well, you sent over $100,000 over, and we need to update our records." And I says, "Okay." I says, "What do you do with this information?" There's nothing. We put it in a file cabinet, and if the government ever comes asking, we've got the we've got our files that we show them. I says, "Okay, ask away." He asked me some very general questions, and at the time we had like 500 websites in the travel industry and whatnot, but I wasn't giving him all of these details. I gave him our main company name, which is kind of long, Client Server Engineering Services Corporation, and our website is an acronym of that. And so anyway, he about 2 weeks later, I'm in the middle of doing a transfer and I get stopped. And I called him up and I says, "What's the problem?" He says, "Well, I went to look up your company and I couldn't find anything on it. So I took your case to the board, and the board said we're not going to do any more transfers for you unless you provide us a copy of your personal tax returns." And I said, let me see if I get this straight.
Yeah.
You told me the information, and by the way, I walked him through the after the fact. I had walked him through the travel sites and whatnot. I says, I answered the questions you asked me. Okay. You didn't say exactly where does all of your money come from, blah, 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 blah. That never played into it. I says, and you told me this goes into a file cabinet. You didn't say anything about taking it up to a board for review. I said, now you want a copy of my personal tax returns because I'm supposed to trust you because you keep your word about what you're going to do with my information? Kiss my ass. Yeah, that's another service I don't use anymore, Zoom.
Yeah. I hear you.
So yes, I suppose I could go back to using them if I wanted them and I wanted to give them my tax information. I don't think I do.
Yeah, I don't.
And,
Yeah.
okay, does everybody here belong to the group um, AI Book Builders?
No,
Yes.
I don't.
No.
There are some people that don't. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the link for AI Book Builders in the chat, and I'm going to post the prompts and whatnot there. There is no charge. I'm not trying to, rope you into a paid group. And the reason I did this group, the reason I created another group, is I said this is a little bit dangerous. I do a lot of promotion in this Story Hackers Gold, and if the owner of that group ever decided he didn't like that
Yeah.
and went to boot me out, I would be kind of high and dry. And a lot of the other groups are just very anti anything AI written. So
Yeah.
if
Right.
you don't belong to AI Book Builders, there's the link. Go ahead and join it, and you'll be able to pick all of the resources from today's demonstration up there.
Thank you,
We're going
Jeff.
to do this you're welcome. We're going to do this every Saturday during this challenge. We called it a 30-day challenge, but you can actually use the software 45 days or until July 1st and see what works. I see lots of people asking, what's the best software? Well, I can't tell you. I don't own Novel Crafter. I've never used it. I'm not going to mention the name, but I went to a webinar a couple of weeks ago where somebody was demonstrating another software, and I was not impressed.
Hmm.
And so I says, I think it's about time we let people make up their own mind
Hmm.
without having to break the bank. So even if you just go in and you write as many books as you can between now and July 1st, and go out and make lots of money, and I don't make any money off of you, no hard feelings. I'd rather see you get something done.
Hey Jeff, I have a couple quick questions. Kind of at the beginning of your conversation, you started showing us each chapter that you had written. When you write the first chapter, do you essentially do some kind of a wireframe or give it a paragraph and say, this is what I want this chapter to be about? Or do you start with the end in mind where you kind of give an overview of the complete story and then kind of get the chapters to fill in the blanks kind of thing?
I give it a basic description of what the story is going to be about. All right.
Okay.
Not on a chapter by chapter basis. And I tell it I want to use this framework. And there's a place in the outline where you specify the number of chapters. If you're gonna tell it to use a particular framework, I do that like the hero's journey. I did that outside. I went outside and I said I'd like an outline for X, and then however many chapters that said it was, that's what I told the software it was. There's a post I made. There's a post I made where I talk about I don't know everything Instaauthor can do. I am learning more all the time of different ways to use the software. To me, it's a tool, and when I see these people go nuts and uh, talk about AI crap, blah 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 blah, I wonder if these are the same people who would use a hatchet to chop down a tree when a chainsaw is available.
Right.
We have the ability to put lots of books out. Now, if you want to write the next great American novel, you're going to invest more time. You're going to invest more time to get that book out. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. And maybe all this does is get you past your writer's block, or set up a framework for you to follow through on, or give you lots of good ideas, right?
Right.
Maybe that's all it does for you. If you're writing something, if you want to write interesting stories, I wrote one. I put together a book that teaches the middle school age people. He teaches them how the internet actually works. Okay, how you get from A to B. And the reason I did it was because I have some outsourced workers, and one of my outsourced workers been with me for years. I realize doesn't actually get it, doesn't actually understand what the role of DNS is, and we have multiple hosting, multiple servers, and whatnot, and wasn't seeing how things tie together, right? Here's one of the things that I didn't know would happen up front. If you tell it it's middle school and you don't prompt it and let it know that this is going to be for adults, then it assumes that you're writing for children. So one of the challenges I ran into is when I was doing my book on growing marijuana, uh, all of the AIs were coming back with criticism about, you seem to be encouraging children to use drugs.
You're a
So,
bad man.
so
Gary.
I had to change. I had to go in and actually tell the AI, yes, I said this is at a middle school reading level, but the intended audience is for adults, and then it would redo the evaluation.
So
But
here,
you did. Go ahead.
I got a next question. Go ahead and finish what you're saying, then I'll drop my next question.
No, it's okay. I lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, you had mentioned that you do some how-tos. And as I was looking through your templates, I didn't recognize a how-to. Do you have a how-to template? And the second part of the question is, how do you model your marketing of your how-to books, given that you're not doing Kindle or KDP?
Okay, well, one of the things that you can do with the how-to, right? Like one thing that nobody's been able to ban me from yet is email marketing. Okay. So I've done a number of books on affiliate marketing, email marketing, etc. And these are good authority builders when you're dealing with clients. So there's the value in it for me. When you ask about, let me go back to Instaauthor for a moment. When you say templates, are you talking about where I showed you the hero's journey, or are you talking about when it talks about what kind of book it is?
Well, you actually had a drop down, and
Okay,
on that drop
that
down,
drop down,
through
you're
that.
right. That drop down was about story frameworks.
Okay.
Okay, so let me show you what we actually have for the best way to be show it is in an outline. Let the outline load up. Listen, if you're doing this and you see a delay like this, just be patient. Okay, there's a whole lot of validation going on in terms of your use and not confusing what you do with somebody else. We had to put all of the book generation into a queue system, because otherwise a single book could bring it to a grinding halt. All right, so let's take the book we've been talking about. And we're going to go to the generate book section. I want to do this here. Do I want to do this in outline? Let's see, we'll go to the generate book section. Now, we use multi-level prompting, all right? So let's come down here to our system prompt. If you were going to do a book on gardening, you would want to use the system prompt for gardening, all right? But have a look here.
All right, there's a few, right?
Now, not only is there a bunch, but we cover in our videos how you can create your own system prompt, modeling after ours, how you can go into the AI, show them our system prompt and say, I want you to do this for whatever. Here's one that I was just kind of, I was playing around, and there were two that I came up with just for fun. I did one for Star Trek. Okay, so we have any Star Trek fans? I don't
Yes.
believe
Yeah, you
it.
do.
Okay. All right. So let me show you what the Star Trek system prompt looks like. I have to put this into another document so that you can see the whole thing at once. Here we go. Now check out that prompt. You're a seasoned Star Trek historian and storyteller, fully immersed in the lore, ethos, and stylistic nuances of the Star Trek universe. Draw from the Federation's ideals, the tapestry of interstellar diplomacy, and the complex moral challenges faced by diverse species. Craft a narrative or a set of them that reflects the spirit of exploration, the pursuit of knowledge, and the respect for life and cultural diversity. Begin by establishing a setting consistent with Star Trek canon, whether aboard a Federation starship, a star base, or on a newly encountered planet. Introduce characters who embody Starfleet values: cooperation, curiosity, and ethical leadership, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Now you can turn around and combine this with characters that you already know or new characters you create, and write your own Star Trek story.
And you did all that without the prime directive.
I did. Actually, I think the prime directive is listed in here somewhere.
I didn't
But it
see
was AI who came up with this for me.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh my, it's so good.
I had a basic idea, and I said, okay, let's do one for Star Trek. I'll show you another one I did. All right. I was sad to see this series go away, but I have one here for the Blacklist. And so it will turn around and write following that type of framework. So this is really where that's determined. Okay. Now you can
Beautiful.
turn around and you can say, I want the hero's journey out of a blacklist scenario. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Those are just frameworks for stories. This is where you get down to it. And we have, all different sorts of things. One of the people who was doing testing is an opal specialist.
Right.
And so we turned around and we said, give us an opal system prompt.
Jeffrey, that's great stuff. And I have to ask, how do I gain access?
Oh, well, we're giving access away right now.
Yes, but I missed the first 15 minutes, and so I'm a little.
Okay. Did you get the piece where we gave you access into the group AI Book Builders?
Yes, I did. Okay.
Okay. If you go into AI Book Builders, you'll find the information in there. Basically, all you have to do is you go to instaauthor.com, and when you get there, click on the sign up. There's a where you would log in. There's a, your typical sign up at the bottom. Sign up, and then send me a message on school with the email that you use, because I have to go in and approve the account. It's not going to ask you for a credit card or anything.
Okay. And that was instaauthor.com.
Yes.
Thank you, Jay.
Instaauthor.
Okay.
You're welcome. Welcome. Yeah, I'm kind of proud of it. It's it was a beast. I actually started working on this last September, and we changed building platforms. We changed what the back end would be. We're using Google's back end now, and we changed how it's hosted. Part of this is hosted by Amazon, and part of it's hosted by Google. We
What
try
could go
to
wrong?
accommodate. Pardon me?
What could go wrong?
You're right. Right. Um, there is something on this that I did not mention, and this is kind of a new thing. You see where it says content type here, fiction, nonfiction? It's important to make a selection here, because the process for going through and validating what you've already wrote is different between a fiction and nonfiction book. And I'm going to show you something that most people will never see. I'm going to give you a peek into the back end. Somebody contacted me and asked me, they had two requests. One of them was that we add Claude 3.7, okay, as one of the choices. And the other thing was, there's I forget the name of it. There's some tool out there that will allow you to choose multiple AIs and buy everything through them. And it was
Open
pretty
Router?
easy. Pardon me?
Is it called Open Router?
Yes, Open Router. Thank you. 2:16 in the morning, and I'm still somewhat coherent. Asking about adding Open Router. Okay. Well, if it comes to adding a model for somebody we already support, and we support DeepSeek, we support OpenAI, we support Anthropic, we support both Groks. There's a GROK and a GROQ. If you're adding a model from one of them, that's an easy ask. But when you go to add a new provider, it's a different animal. Okay. And we end up with what could be 10 days of testing. So we don't do those as fast. Now, you see all these models down the left-hand side.
Yes.
Okay. These are all of the current possibilities. All right. But we have taken a lot of these. Well, looks like somebody's gone through and mucked with it a bit. There are a lot of these that you wouldn't necessarily want to use. Okay. Like there would be no reason to use a Whisper model. And I had gone through and disabled, and maybe somebody went, every time that we do an update, every time we say, go get all of the latest models, that's what this does. It goes and it pulls everything. And, but you see here, I added the 3.7 for him. Now, I know that when they first came out, Claude did a better job than most at writing, but I will tell you that even 4.0 Mini under this system does a very good job. You don't need to spend $15 on a million tokens when 60 cents on a million tokens will do. And if you get down to DeepSeek, it doesn't do as good of a job. Your stuff comes out shorter than it does in, say, Grok. But an outline and a 100-page book out of DeepSeek probably costs you 3 pennies. That would be the DeepSeek chat.
Wow.
There's another DeepSeek in here somewhere that I had turned off. So I'm going to have to go through and audit these once again. But this is back in the admin side. So you shouldn't really see models that aren't really good for you to use. The other thing is that when you query these models, it was still coming up. Let me see if it still does. I'm not seeing it. It was still coming up with 3.5 turbo and whatnot, and those models aren't even available. Okay, so when they did the refresh, it took that away finally. Got it. I also had taken out 4.5. There were somebody in the story hackers group says, $34. They had spent $34 in a day. Was it really that expensive? So I explained to them why they got charged that $34. It wasn't on our system, but they were just going in and using it open, I guess, with somebody else's stuff. Anyway, but yeah, Mini is a good model. Here's something else to consider too. If you like the output, let's say you like the output of GPT-4o Mini, all right, and you say, but I wonder if Claude can do a better job. Well, it's just a flick of a switch, because you can choose what model you use for the outline. You can choose what model you use to generate the story. And if you want to come back and generate the story again, you just go to the generate book. It pulls everything from the outline, and then just choose a different model and see how it comes out. But 4.0 Mini is very inexpensive to test with, to play with. Grok's been inexpensive for me this month. The end of this month, they're gonna stop giving me what they've been giving me. Grok's been giving me $150 a month in credit to use, and OpenAI was giving me 1 million tokens a day,
Oh,
which was really handy during this testing.
I bet.
Yeah, saved me a bit of money. But see, like I don't know if there's probably no reason at all to use GPT 4.1 for writing. That would just get expensive. Yeah, so let me go ahead and save somebody some money. But anyway, yeah, that's the basics. That's the basics. But every Saturday, 2 p.m. between now and the 1st of July, we're going to be demonstrating different aspects of this, showing you how to use it, answering your questions, and learning about what it can do with you. And here's my last note on all of this. Some of you that are here have been customers of my automation software in the past. And the one thing that's always held true is that every software that I have put out, it's the customers who make it better. It's the customer's request, the people who say, can it do this, or how would I do that? And I say, that's something I hadn't even thought of. and
Right.
then we'll go and we'll make it happen.
Awesome.
So,
You
and I
mentioned,
am looking for that feedback. I want to know how it compares to these other writers out there. What am I missing? What are they doing better? What feature do they have? See, we don't write one chapter at a time. That software I told you that I saw, it wrote one chapter at a time. So you could go in and you could put in, you know, whatever it is, and it would help you complete it. That's not the way this works.
that's
I
good to know.
intentionally didn't look at anybody else's stuff before I did it, because when you do that, you have the tendency to create a Me Too product. Here's another little time saver down here on the bottom. We have these book defaults. Now, this only applies to the book page, not to the outline page. But if you put information in here like what reading level you want to use, what default model you want to use, what your default pre-prompt and your default prompt is, you can select it here. If you come up with a custom prompt and you think it's really good and you want to have it on the list, I'm happy to add it. All right. Um, but if it's not on the list, you can simply come in here and paste in what you want and choose custom. And
Okay.
that'll be your custom prompt in these. And there's temperature settings for both the outlines and the book. Everybody understand temperature? That determines how much imagination the AI has. And so
Right.
if you're writing nonfiction, it probably should be down here somewhere around 0.1.
Right.
These additional instructions were something I came up with to make the writing look more human. And my original pre-prompt, people were talking about just chatter on the internet. We're talking about, their work being discovered as having been written by AI. Well, there's some telltale signs with AI in how the writing is done. AI writes balanced, okay? It provides what it sees as a balanced view, even though, the biases come in. It writes what it thinks is a balanced view, and it writes formulaically. So I came up with a pre-prompt that I use that keeps that from happening. It makes it more opinionated. If you think about your own writing, I'll tell you in mine, some of the best stuff that I've wrote has been when I was pissed off about something. Okay. So I have a very definitive point of view. Years ago, my start in delivering tools to IM folks, I wrote a PDF on automation tools. And I wrote it because a lot of people were saying, this tool doesn't work anymore, that tool doesn't work anymore. There was nothing wrong with the tools. I'm not talking about my tools. These were other people's tools. There's nothing wrong with the tool. It was how they were using it. You buy SE Nuke and you open up the box and you run the default template. Well, when it first came out, you could do that and you could blast something to the top of page 1. Over time, that changed. You needed a different strategy. So I wrote this book this PDF that explained that, and I ended up getting about 600 customers across more than half a dozen products, all starting with that PDF. So this is kind of the power of some of this stuff you can do. That was wrote by hand, and like I said, I was a bit passionate about it. But you can program that passion. You can have it give a biased or controversial point of view without defining it in advance. Just defining that it is going to be controversial. Let's look at this default prompt. This is the one for growing marijuana. Now, I had the AI create this as a model after another default prompt I had. And you can tell when you look at it, when you look at the information, it says offer at least one non-standard technique or grow setup that works for you, like a DIY trellis hack or unconventional soil mix, even if it bucks industry trends or seems unpolished. This is just part of the prompt to give me something that if I turn around and I send it to AI and I'll ask it, I'll say, what's the probability that this was written by AI? And it'll typically come back with 15 to 25%. It says it looks like it could have some AI influence, but was largely written by a human. And the reality was none of it was wrote by a human.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to hold you folks up anymore. It's you stuck around for 90 minutes. Wish I had a buy link for you, but that's not the purpose of this.
Hey, Jeffrey, I wanted to just turn you on to something that I came across recently. I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Filsaime. Does that name ring a bell?
I know Mike.
Yeah, he has a product now called courses.gg, which is a ripoff of School. Right now, he's doing a program where it's a lifetime buy, unlimited pages, unlimited courses, and for $300. So if it is a decent ripoff of School, it could save some money. It sounds like you're into School a little bit.
I have a. Are you familiar with Everlesson?
No.
Okay. Well, Everlesson is one of those learning platforms, right? And it's got all the buzzers and bells. The value of School is not the functionality of it.
The traffic. I got you.
It's the traffic, right? And Mike has a failing product out there right now with Groove.
All right.
I don't think Groove's going to survive, right? And I think what Mike's doing now is this is what I mean about Me Too products.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that Mike's going to survive going up against School with his tool because he's going to have a limited audience. I learned a lot from Mike. I used to be in his private mastermind. A lot of people don't, but I personally like him. But the whole Groove thing, and anytime you're going after another big market that's always got the established position. I also have this. I have this basic rule when it comes to building software and whatnot. I don't do it unless I think I can do it better than it's being done.
Okay.
And when you look at the volume, I mean, look at Story Hackers right now. This guy gained like 50 new users over the last 24 hours. Now, if all of these new users are paying, let's say they're paying 40 something dollars a month.
I'm on a free
That's
7-day.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, Jeff. Didn't mean to interrupt. I'm on a free 7-day membership trial right now. So you got my attention.
Well, I'm actually paying 44. Remember, I was talking earlier about about being kicked out of and banned from whatever. I figure Story Hackers. It's just a matter of time.
As for Mike Filsaime, I was one of the first guys that picked up Webinar Jam and Evergreen Webinar with a lifetime license. And that was 10 years ago, and it's still going strong. So, I think I understand where you're coming from, and I think there are winners and losers. And we'll see. We'll see if his program is a winner or a loser.
One of the things that he missed on was he promised a live webinar system out of Groove.
No.
which
Yeah.
they never delivered on, right? And go high level. Which I'm not a big fan of go high level. Don't get me wrong, right? Go high level was built a piece at a time, so it's not intuitive. But when it comes to their support, they've got people 24 hours a day standing by to answer your questions, right? I checked it out for a month, but I think there's too much catch up to do, and I think that Go High Level has such a high rate of acceptance and people promoting it. And now, they're probably going to hurt themselves because they've started doing a bunch of little add-ons. It used to be, for $100 a month, you got your own account. For 300 a month, you could have unlimited accounts that you could pass on to your customers. And all of those have additional fees on them now. So we'll see what happens. I wish Mike the best. I really do. As a matter of fact, I have Groove, and Mike gave me Groove. Mike gave me Groove for free. And I still don't
Don't use it. I got you.
Yeah, it's there's some other ones. There's another one called FlowTrack. Somebody else gave me an account on FlowTrack. You know, uh, too many shiny objects, too many whatever. But I think Groove has some serious problems because of where they are in the marketplace. And I think if he's going to come in, I don't know what's his with his new education platform. What's his USP?
Well, he says then I put the link in the chat, but he has a VSL at the beginning that says he has made improvements to the school model. I don't know what those are, so we'll see. I don't know. For $300 lifetime unlimited, I'm going crap. I'll roll the dice. That's kind of where I'm coming
Yeah,
from.
and it's probably a good bet. I mean, you should at least be able to get your money back out of that when you consider what we're spending now,
True.
right?
Well, and the
And
other
if he's
thing is,
able to build the traffic,
as you were saying, when you're marketing to your own people and you're drawing your own people, what does it matter? Because I can plug in my own URL anyway. So it doesn't have to be Courses GG, and I'm catering to my audience as opposed to trying to cast a bigger net into an ocean of audience.
yeah, it's that was always the problem that I had with the automation tools that I was putting out. We came out with tools. We had this one called uh, Video Instant Penetrator, and it was going through and it was doing video poking. And before we did it, for some reason, everybody thought that it couldn't be automated, right? We automated it, and within 2 months, I had 4 people doing the copycats.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's just the way it goes. But a big problem I found was once those 600 people had bought whatever I was offering at the time, um, how do you go find another pond?
True.
I never cracked that code. I never figured that one out. Now maybe paid maybe paid advertising would have been the key there, but Google didn't want my money, so what
Give
can
Bill
I
Gates a
say?
call. Come on, call Microsoft. The other thing, Microsoft, well, a lot of their natural users are people that have default browsers on their computers, which are seniors. So if you're looking for a tech savvy senior audience, Microsoft might be the way to advertise.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could be kicking myself in the rear end a year from now, um, There's another guy who's the guy who came up with Everlesson, Chad Nicely, is coming up with another education platform that he's supposedly going to give us. But I bought another platform from him that I paid like $2,500 for, called Lead Conversion System. And one day it just disappeared. It just vanished. So
No, that's uh,
I've kind of had it with the IM ethos.
yeah, I know that the price tags keep getting bigger and bigger. There was a course the other day they were selling. I sat through. I don't know, paid $50 for a 3-day course of sorts, and at the end they were selling a $17,000 product. I'm going, oh my gosh! I think they sold 20 of them, and I've seen a lot of these $15,000 programs sold, and I'm going, man, you guys are gonna have the worst buyer remorse. You know what I mean? 17 grand.
Maybe not. Maybe not. There was a guy who did uh, a seminar, a conference. All these people came to, and he sold this course on DVD at the seminar, and he was charging 25 grand. And he sold a bunch of them, right? Maybe 25, 30 of them at least. And come to find out later, there was an error in the DVDs. The burn had gone wrong, and only one person had come back to him.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
The rest of them hadn't even looked at it.
Never even took the cellophane off, huh?
That's it. That's it. And there's a certain amount of the IM industry. It's sort of like, think of it like this, okay? There's so many people that go right after the first of the year and they buy gym memberships because they're going to get in shape, right? And maybe your local gym cares, but I promise you that Jack LaLanne and Planet Fitness and whatnot, they don't. What is it they want? They want you to spend your money but never show up, because if everybody showed up, they haven't got the space of the equipment for it. Okay. Well, the IM industry is a little bit like that. These guys sell stuff that they know that the vast majority of people are never going to open. They're
Wow.
never going to use. I had people buy things from me and contact me 3 years later. What does this do? I never used it. Does it still work? Okay, it's very common. And I've been guilty of buying stuff I didn't use. I have a friend that many of you may know named Tim Parker. And I said to Tim one day, I says, Tim, I'm going to retire on 10% of the stuff that you bought and you don't use. There's just there's a lot of that. So there's my favorite one. My favorite one is, for a while everybody was running around saying there's no such thing as a magic bullet. There's no such thing as a magic bullet. So somebody comes out with a course called Magic Bullet, sold $1 million overnight. Kid you not.
Oh my God.
Mike Filsame is famous for writing the first sales letter that did $1 million overnight.
Something butterflies, right?
I No, he did it. He did this for somebody else. It wasn't for his butterfly marketing course.
Right. Huh?
Yeah, but no, Mike was, when I was in his mastermind, he was very generous with his time, and he really, for the questions I had for him, he went out of his way to explain it and get answers. It wasn't until Mike that I understood the most important number in marketing.
Eyeballs,
EPC,
earnings per
There
click.
it is. Yeah.
the most important. Everything backtracks to earnings per click, right? Yeah. And a lot of people forget. I mean, I used to do some very high level SEO, I've ranked for terms like for single word terms like blinds, or I was hired by an SEO company to rank for make money fast. That's a $10,000 a day keyword. Okay.
Wow.
And I find so many people who think that getting to the top of Google, getting that #1 position, that is the holy grail. And they've completely forgotten that the only reason we ever did SEO was for the traffic. You've got to keep your eye on the traffic.
That's perfect.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, and yet Google never sent me a check for ranking. Never happened. Yeah. No, it is. It's keeping your eye on the traffic ball, and that's what I like about, where Mosey bought this, he put money into it, and he's obviously, I mean, I look at how this one group is growing. And I'm like, this is crazy stuff. I offered the owner of the group, it was about 3 months ago. I offered him a deal. I wanted to offer the people in the group 20% off and pay him a 20% commission. But I wanted to walk through the software with him, because he wanted to evaluate it. And in 3 months, we could never make the time. And then one day I realized, you know what? He's making so much on the group that 20% doesn't mean anything to him. Almost no matter how many of them you would sell. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there are some people that don't understand the value of recurring commission. That's another one. I took on a product. It was a product called SEO Autopilot, and I was the first affiliate for it. And they were only paid a 20% commission. And so another affiliate, I won't mention his name, but I had recruited him in, and he never installed the software. And the SEO Autopilot guy says, "What's going on with this guy?" So I called him up. He says, "They want a lot for their 20%. Periodically I'll talk to them and I'll say, yeah, they only pay 20%. It's only amounted to $23,000 so far." Because it's a recurring commission.
Sure.
So here's what you guys are going to get. Those who are in the group who sign up before July 1st, I'm going to give you a 35% discount.
Oh yeah.
It's going to bring your cost down to like $30. Okay. And all I've done there is I've taken away what I was going to pay him and what I was going to offer out on a discount. After July 1st, people who sign up who are in the group will get a 20% discount. So, that's the plan.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate
You're
that,
welcome.
Jeffrey.
No problem.
Take good care. I've got to run.
Be well.
You
I'm
too.
going to let all of you go unless anybody's got any more questions.
Go get some Z's.
I will. Thanks for coming, guys. Bye-bye.
Good night, Jeffrey.